Futurama comic issue 27. Bender sees Calculon in the middle of a tornado that's right outside his window, and the reporter's even got a cameraman recording it while she's in it. Somehow Calculon didn't know it was a real storm and suddenly gets too stressed out to keep holding on to the actress. Somehow, after Leela and Amy come to work, Fry still doesn't know there really was a windstorm outside when he was told it was really happening earlier. Amy prepared a disaster kit for a bad hair day, so she sprays her hair to magically get it back to normal. The cable goes out, so Bender freaks out. Why would there still be cable in the 31st century? Farnsworth knows why the weather's gone so badly, and predictably it's his fault. And he thinks the Earth might soon be destroyed, but why would a builder of doomsday devices be concerned about that? It turns out there's been a variety of extreme weather all over the planet. Somehow it's being caused by a shift in the Earth's inner core, even though the core is inside the planet. And obviously the planet's surface would separate the core from the sky. This reminds me of 25 years later. It had the exact same kind of apocalypse thing in that story. I don't see how the core's state would affect the atmosphere. I get it causing more volcanic eruptions, which could send more ash into the sky and make things colder. Farnsworth says that the only thing that could cause this kind of activity is a breach of the outer core, which protects the inner core. He says he's the only one who ever invented a vehicle that could travel into the inner Earth and survive. Even by the 31st century. He says somehow that vehicle was stolen, and it's satisfying that Leela grabs Bender and tells him to explain himself. Bender says he caused that ship to fall into the wrong hands, but didn't know what it was capable of. Then how did he manage to convince someone to buy it? He says it happened last summer when Fry and Hem took part in the Robot Arms annual yard sale. Fry's expected to stand there holding Bender's stuff, and then he realizes that one of his mid-condition comics was including Bender's stuff. And Bender casually ruins one of its pages. And then Bender conveniently got approached by some fire alien who wanted to buy the ship. I guess Bender's really strong and carried the ship all the way here. After some wasted panels, conveniently it turns out that Farnsworth recognizes what kind of alien species Bender had sold the ship to. Well, he's lived the longest out of all of them, so no wonder he'd know the most amount of species, but it could have easily not been this way. He says it's widely known that the Magmoids' home planet has been suffering from global cooling, so they've started mining the molten liquid from other planets and pumping it back into their own, instead of imitating global warming. I guess they really need magma specifically. And now he knows how they managed to do it. And he thinks that the pressure between the inner and outer cores of the Earth will become too uneven from the extraction and it'll ruin the planet. As usual, I'm tempted to not take it seriously because it's just an episodic series. But since there was an issue that ended in the universe being destroyed, it being episodic means that they could actually fail to save the world here. But it still won't matter because the next issue will have it be fine. Bender tells everyone to not spend their last moments bitter and angry, and Fry says Bender owes everyone an apology. It's always great when he calls him out. It's too bad he can't get a new best friend. Farnsworth has a better idea and reveals that a good genius always makes a copy of his work. This is one of those moments of his where he's truly brilliant. And you need those to make a character actually seem smart. Just saying that someone can engineer and program isn't enough. But they're so rare when most of the time he's just a source of old man jokes or doesn't care about anything. So I usually forget these moments of brilliance. He tells Leela to pilot the spare ship to the Earth's core to stop the bad guys before the planet explodes, and Leela wishes that somebody else could get their pilot's license. Farnsworth tells Fry that he'll be needed to keep Leela awake on the long journey by talking to her about the past. He doesn't provide any reason for why he's sending Bender on the mission too. I have to assume it's because of his abilities. Why does he apologize? Bender's responsible for all of this. Why is he being polite to him? Bender spit takes at Zoidberg and is told that due to his construction, this is a trip where he might be the only one to survive the pressure of the Earth's interior. Anything surviving would be doubtful. Bender confuses me by liking the idea of being the only survivor of this trip. Farnsworth says that the Magmoids are made of the same elements that exist in the inner core, So their goal is to trap them inside the core's shell and seal off the entrance with gamma prods, and they have to strike their tips against the area for sealing. He thinks the magmoids will dissolve in the inner core and restore the balance of Earth's pressure. The magmoids sure are magical. He says they'll need flight suits to withstand the core for an hour. Amy must be joking when she tells them to bring her back stuff they couldn't possibly get. Bender ends up completely counterproductive. Oh good, he only stops Fry from talking once, and then he decides to go to sleep. Must be nice to be able to power down in a second. Both of them end up being asleep anyways. I don't know why it's taking so long. This is already the future. Bender wakes up, luckily deciding to do so at the right time when they're both asleep, and takes a book on Inner Earth and presses buttons. Leela and Fry get woken up by blinding light, and they're being blinded by an area where a mountain range of diamonds formed, according to a guide. And Leela blames Bender for the unscheduled pit stop. Luckily, she and Fry can adjust the tint of their helmet shields to avoid being blinded. Farnsworth really thought of everything. So Bender is taking conveniently already cut diamonds from the Earth. I don't blame him. And Leela says he can't just take what he wants from the Earth. Oh, but Miner's doing that is perfectly a-okay. How else are people supposed to get Earth's resources? She talks as if taking a simple bag of diamonds will disrupt the entire planet's delicate balance. Doesn't she know how big the planet is? He was putting the diamonds in the airbags from the ship, in a part of the core that's completely separate from the part of it with the lava that they're trying to save. What would anything he's doing here affect what's out there? The only reason I'm not a lot more pissed off is because it's not like it's Manek trying to sell some treasure to support his family in a dictatorship where they're fugitives who couldn't get jobs anyways. Those were special circumstances. But Bender's a jerk who already has a job. It cuts ahead to the ship being about to burst through to the outer core, and Bender starts admitting secrets because they're getting closer to the center of the Earth, where its magnetic forces are stronger. So his inhibition unit isn't acting properly, causing him to say he knows where the professor hides the bodies. Speaking of Leela's comedic sociopathy, she doesn't want them to tell her the answer to get justice. It's pragmatic of her because if Farnsworth got arrested and lost his job, she wouldn't be able to make use of his inventing skills to save the day anymore, and increase her chances of survival. Although there is a chance that Hermes could replace Farnsworth as her boss, so she'd still have a job. But not a safe supply of new inventions. Also, won't he just vaporize and turn into ash instead of having bodies to hide? It's smart of her to stay focused on the mission and tell Fry to strap Bender in and get back to his seat. As Bender is singing a song he somehow knows from 1,000 years ago. Their ship finds the Magmoids, who get confronted, and suddenly one of them tries to lecture Leela and the audience they didn't think the Earthlings could care because they've been squandering their natural resources for millennia. How's it squandering to use the natural resources instead of letting it sit there doing nothing when we need them? That would be squandering them. Fry says it's their planet to ruin, and they're willing to fight for the right to screw it up how and when they please. Their work's almost done, so they're gonna split, and somehow Leela doesn't get hurt when she's wasting time telling Fry she got a comeback from a biography Fry gave her for her birthday. It was sweet of her to read it when she wouldn't have cared about it. The prods turn the bad guys to stone, which will replenish the core. Fry must have forgotten that he was told the prods can do that because it's been hours. I guess this is hardly the first time they've destroyed people because they don't really care whether they do it or not. Fry wastes time telling them to get out of his planet when obviously he needs them to stay here to replenish the core, and he can't look around or fight when he's talking. So the Magmoid effortlessly steals his weapon and tells Leela to drop hers or he'll cause the Earth to explode with it. The Magmoid explains that he doesn't mind destroying himself and the other Magmoids because if they don't escape with Earth's elements, their planet's doomed anyways, so they have nothing to lose. Bender breaks free of the chains and saves Fry and Leela, blasting a ton of light at them because of the diamonds he hid in his chest. He needs a lot more moments where he's vitally useful to justify his friends putting up with him. I like that the song he's singing matches perfectly with what he's doing to save them, seeing that he's gonna let it shine. Leela and Fry get to use the prods on the bad guys. The place is filling with lava quick, so Leela tells Fry to go to the Magmoid ship and reverse the pump's flow of molten liquid to speed up the refill of the outer core. The ship gets made to start escaping, and we cut to a few days later, where it turns out the professor stole all of Bender's diamonds. But since his drilling ship did nearly cause the end of the world, the dupe is insisting he pay the reparations to rebuild the world's cities. So of course he took the diamonds. Bender reveals he was actually smart enough to keep a few of the diamonds himself. And surprisingly, he's willing to give Leela and Fry one of the diamonds. So Leela's gonna waste the diamond money on something stupid, while Fry's gonna save it for Leela. Farnsworth is smarter than Rick by talking politely to the president and apologizing for the trouble his drilling machine caused. There's a bunch of bright light near the woman from the diamonds near her, and after he's thanked, Farnsworth puts on some sunglasses and is about to go with some old ladies to a party with a pool of champagne. He says all this bling makes it hard to move, and he doesn't explain why he's so sure that he won't get in trouble for not giving all of the diamonds to the government. Well, he was told that these diamonds will more than cover the costs to rebuild the damaged cities. More than. I can't really blame him for wanting to spend some of the diamonds on himself. It'd suck if not even most of the diamonds he was forced to give up were actually used to rebuild the cities, but it'd also suck if they didn't have enough diamonds to do that. And the government could just assume that he got this money by selling one of his inventions. I like the ending here because it's more realistic and less confusing than him acting totally polite and innocent. This story was about the Earth being in immediate danger because aliens are drilling into its core to steal its lava, with the drilling ship that Bender sold to them at a yard sale. I wish we knew how he even got that ship all the way to the yard sale. I don't know why drilling into the core would cause the weather to go crazy all over the place though. And that's the whole reason the heroes knew what to do. The heroes predictably succeed at saving the world, turning the bad guys into stone that'll replenish the Earth's core after Bender saves them with the light from the diamonds he got back. If he hadn't made an unauthorized visit to get some diamonds because he's not up to Leela's standards, they would have never survived and saved the world. The Magmoids should have just gone to live on another planet as refugees, instead of dooming plenty of other planets, in a clearly pointless effort to prolong their own planet's lifespan. It's pointless because they have to keep doing it over and over again instead of it remaining saved. Futurama comic issue 28. Zoidberg says he's gonna tell the story with a twist ending, and all it'll cost his friends is a sandwich. I like that it turned out he was talking to his friends instead of the audience. The twist ending is that he already ate the sandwich, and it must have belonged to Hermes since he decides to run after him to try to beat him up. It's pretty unlikable of Hermes because Zoidberg is poor while Hermes isn't, so Hermes could easily make another sandwich or buy the ingredients for more. Well, he couldn't. And I assumed he ate it because he was starving. Bender's told that what's on TV is the scary door. I never saw The Twilight Zone, and I heard this is a reference to it. We see a man on his way home from a boring day at the office, and he wishes something exciting would happen to him. A fire truck tries to pass him, and it's immediately predictable when he bets that his neighbor's house is on fire that it's, oh, he's the one on fire, and instantly becomes a skeleton. At least it wasn't as bad as I thought because he was a jerk. After he assumed his neighbor's house of all houses was on fire, he was excited to see it and wanted to speed up so he could watch it burn. And this was supposed to be karma. Farnsworth shows up and tells the crew they'll be making a delivery to the writing department of the Scary Door TV show. What an amazing coincidence that he says this right after they watch the show. Did they think we wouldn't remember what the Scary Door was if we didn't get a reminder? We would have been reminded anyways by the pages after this. They need to deliver paper and junk food, and Fry's made fun of by the writer in a way that's a little satisfying. He says he's gonna ask the writing staff where they get their ideas, and unrealistically bets that no one ever asks them that. Then someone expects Planet Express to sign in, and Bender says laser on, and a laser signs it, and Leela's surprisingly nice by complimenting him on his writing. Bender jokes that his grandpa was a laser printer. Fry finds out there's only one writer, and it turns out he gets his ideas from an interdimensional viewing machine. That's not getting ideas. That's watching something and using the material yourself. That's not impressive. He says he discovered a parallel Earth that's coincidentally similar to his in every way but one. That life is always about generating the opposite outcome of what people expect. That'd suck. So someone complains about a sunny day on the one day he remembered his umbrella. He tells Leela that everything that happened in the scary door happened in another dimension. That's overly depressing. And Bender asks him if he could get any other worlds on this device, like one where robots enslaved humanity. He says yes because he doesn't know Bender, and warns him that looking at other worlds would take a lot of power and might tear reality. Why would it take more power than looking at this world? Bender attaches a cold fusion generator from the professor's workplace to it, while deliberately ignoring his warning because he's so desperate to go to a world like that. Even though I'm pretty sure he went to a world like that in the show, so wouldn't he know better than to take his friends there? I guess this is a different universe, where he never went there. And he transports him and his friends to the Twilight Zone, instead of to that robot world. Good, because this is less commonly seen than a world where robots took over. Leela thankfully hears the narrator, which tries to keep the narration all of a sudden from feeling intrusive and boring because it's actually real. And thankfully, the narrator realistically responds to Leela asking him for help. The narrator points out that 3 delivery people have delivered themselves into another dimension. She cleverly tries to ask him for help, and says he's not sure if he could, and that no one asked him for help before. She compliments his voice, and when he offers to give her his voicemail, Fry gets jealous and tells him off, and Leela calls him out because he might have needed his help. Fry's a good point. He knows how the scary door works. If he says he'll help them, he'll try to kill them. Wait a minute, it's essentially a world run by, and then the opposite happens. So Butch Hartman shows are like the Twilight Zone, although it might be hard to figure out what the exact opposite of something is. Fry says that as long as they expect to be in danger, there won't be any, so they'll be safe. But now that he said his plan out loud, it's guaranteed to fail because that's not what he'd expect. And if he didn't say that, they would continue to think they were in danger. But it failing would make sense. Just because they act like they expect something when they don't, doesn't mean the universe will be fooled by their fake act. And if the universe is magical enough to run on irony, it'll see through their act. It's amusing that Bender is freaking out because Fry's making sense. This can't be the first time he's made sense, to be fair. Then he has a lapse in judgment by forgetting he's in the Twilight Zone and can't get away with telling his friends to stick together. Something they would have already probably known to do. So they all get separated from him. It must have been magical, so holding them wouldn't work. And thankfully, to avoid being too confusing, Leela's questioning this, calling out for her friends. But if all Fry has to do to control reality is talk, can't he say something that'll make his friends come back right away? Like, I guess I'll never see my friends again. I definitely won't see them 2 seconds from now. Leela's stomach growls because Zoidberg ate her burrito, and she says it couldn't hurt to get a little snack. Why can't these characters learn to just not talk in this place unless they have to? She immediately made it predictable that she would get hurt. She decides to go to a restaurant serving humans, even though the name makes it immediately obvious what it does. And in a universe that's about subverting your expectations, why would the name of the restaurant tell you what it does? In normal circumstances, she'd give it the benefit of the doubt because of course they wouldn't be allowed to serve human on Earth. But this is another planet where she knows it's all run by irony. She goes inside and gets told they only serve men, not women. She says she'll punch him and that immediately changes his mind. Which makes sense, but is risky behavior on her part. There's plenty of witnesses who tell the police she threatened him. He calls her ma'am, which also makes sense because he's so scared of her. So far it's not as ironic as possible because people's behavior can still make sense. She expected him to act like this and he acted like this. I wish it was explained that the universe is this way because of a curse from a huge amount of witches. That's the only way to make sense, and I'm only able to stay invested by assuming that. He somehow has a fortune-telling machine at a restaurant, which could also be explained away as being ironic. I'm already sick of the word ironic. I see that all the plot holes are going to be explainable because of the universe's gimmick, which is actually fine by me. I wish the later Sonic comics were said to take place in a world like this. That'd explain everything that happens in them. He warns Leela that the fortune-telling machine is never wrong. That obviously means it's always wrong. So there's no reason Leela would take the note warning of her death seriously. Why is Leela being portrayed as too stupid to get it immediately, when she's supposed to be the only one with common sense? She's given a pecan cake, and someone shows up unannounced saying that someone mentioned his name. She wonders if his name is Cake, and he says he has many names, but she just knows him as Death. He was about to do his thing when he decided to step in for coffee. It's intriguing to see the Grim Reaper get humanized. It makes me wish I watched The Grim Adventures of Bill and Mandy. He says that if she'd like, he could look like a skeleton, and you'd think he'd know better than to horrify her by doing that. Then he says she could join him because he hates to see a beautiful woman eat alone. He's so open-minded to say that about a Cyclops. Her purple ponytail helps though. She says as long as she doesn't have to die. But since she's in an ironic world, she should have known better than to say that. He says she'll be safe unless she's allergic to nuts. It'd be immediately obvious to her that this is what's gonna happen to her. It's gonna be constantly frustrating to see a whole story where the main characters are too stupid to know better. At least Bender's not someone I can really sympathize with. So I wish Leela wasn't in the story at all. He says he'll cross the street, as I wish I knew if these bad situations could have been avoided by them not talking and keeping their thoughts to themselves. But Bender is hammy and attention-seeking, so it makes sense that he'd talk to himself in public. Predictably, he can't cross the street. His legs vanish, and he's told he just sold them in exchange for that bottle of beer. And he says that stuff hurts his memory banks, even though he's a robot who needs it for fuel to function properly. But I guess that's supposed to make no sense because it's ironic. Somehow he thinks he has a manicure when he's a robot. Is the Twilight Zone affecting his brain too? He sees a restaurant, and then the next panel he's walking with chicken drumsticks. At first I thought the story completely gave up on making sense and went for sheer randomness. But then I realized I was supposed to care about the fact that there were big drumsticks on top of the restaurant earlier and realized that he stole them. I wish I saw him steal them so it wouldn't be as confusing, because it doesn't look like he could get up to them. But I suppose the story just suddenly cutting Sam with chicken legs was a lot more likely to be funny. Then Fry gets asked by a talking doll to be her friend, and he's smart enough to assume she's evil because she's cute. It's too bad he's probably only this smart because he knows how this place works from the show. I also like that he's aware that Bender's evil. The doll admits that she did something terrible to prove she's worse than Bender. This makes sense because he already said he doesn't trust her, so might as well give up. He says while inexplicably smiling that Bender pushed him down an escalator that was going up, and he was falling for almost an hour. He clearly would have died from that. I think he's just saying that when it didn't actually happen, because it's ironic. She steals candy from a baby effortlessly because she's super strong, apparently. And he says Bender opened a candy store that only sold stolen baby candy, and he's thinking of franchising. It's amusing that he's smiling somehow. But his anecdotes about Bender aren't being illustrated. She robs a bank to impress him as well, and I wonder why he's still talking to her, because he's clearly causing her to cause trouble. And he'd be really selfish not to care. It'd be smart of him if he was intentionally manipulating her in the hopes of something bad happening to her because of all this. Logically, it'd be that she'd get arrested for the bank robbery. Instead, it cuts to them at a train track with dynamite. There's no explanation for how she got this stuff. But maybe that's explainable too, because it's ironic. Also, she's a magical talking doll. Maybe she can summon objects too. She wonders if Bender ever blew up a train, and he says no, and she gets hit by the train. He wonders if that was ironic or not, having confusing dialogue before he gets hit by the train. I guess we're not supposed to take that shock value seriously. After all, if this is a world run by irony, that means he could still be alive and even be totally unharmed. I assume he is dead and it's just written because it's an episodic comic with no continuity. Meanwhile, an alien goes over to Bender when he somehow has a red rooster hat, and is planning on going to a cockfight when clearly he wouldn't be allowed to participate since he doesn't look like a chicken. But never mind, he would, because that'd be ironic, and he knows that. He's given the chance to earn $1 million. He lets him keep talking because he's desperate to believe him and is told to take this box and press the button. Then someone he doesn't know will be hurt. This makes no sense. He's just plotting against Bender, and for all he knows, that means someone who does know will be hurt. He's impressively smart by bashing him in the head with it and says he used it to hurt someone he doesn't know, but he's doing this to scare him into humoring him so that he won't have to press the button. And it's a risky gambit that actually works. But he sorta does know him because he saw him in person. He's not super familiar with him, but I still don't think that's what he meant by don't know. It was very hard to predict that he'd actually get $1 million. So that's impressive. I won't be impressed if it gets destroyed, because that was also obvious from a mile away. Fry's told he's in the afterlife, where he can have anything he wants. How is he in heaven? He joins in on the looting with Bender and so on. Oh, because it's ironic. And it'd be annoying if the story's characters themselves always explained that something dumb happened because it's ironic. So I guess I should be thankful that that doesn't happen every time, and it lets me figure out things for myself. I'm guessing things will go wrong for him. This seems too good to be true. Instead of simply telling them to send him home, he asks for a bunch of material things, like TV. It does make sense that he'd want to enjoy this while it lasts, though. And that he'd assume that he couldn't just ask to go home. So combined with them being selfish more than once in the comic, it's actually not that unexpected that he'd do this. They smirk at each other, so gee, I guess they really are evil. Bender sees a pawn shop and says this is a great place to blow some cash. Is the cash literally going to get blown away? This feels like a parody of the most predictable writing I've ever seen because it's doing this so much. And it's still not getting old. I'm actually having fun with this. Someone offers a genie's lamp and is offered a small amount of money for it. Because of course he wouldn't believe him about it. But he believed him about the flying carpet. Probably because he demonstrated it, and it's the future. Bender says he wants the most expensive thing in the store, and is offered a monkey's paw. Rick and Morty made fun of a monkey's paw. Instead of Bender having my respect because he knows is a twisted wish granter, instead he refuses because he knows what monkeys throw. He takes a watch and doesn't listen to what he has to say about it, even though he's in a dangerous dimension run by irony. I guess the reason he bought the most expensive item in the store just because of its value was because he'd be able to sell it for a lot of money and get richer, because otherwise he's got no reason to care about what looks like an ordinary lame watch that's outdated. He presses the button and walks into someone, and finds out he stopped time. And it's funny that he says nothing can stop him now, except maybe those missiles headed towards Earth. That came out of nowhere. If things happen out of nowhere just because it's ironic, how does reality decide what to make happen when there isn't any logic? It has to be run by a malevolent person because an inanimate object like space-time wouldn't have the creative drive and inspiration and impulsiveness to come up with these random events. And there was a narrator. Bender reassures himself intelligently that he's got all the time in the world to learn how to disarm missiles. Even without a teacher? Then he needs a couple of 1,000 ladders and duct tape to hold them together. I love that he's smart enough to think of this right away. I don't give him enough credit intelligence-wise, for good reason. I love that the text box says an immeasurable amount of time later. Normally I don't like text boxes not being specific enough, but it tries to make up for the fact that it's implausible that he could figure out how to do this. How could he find out how to do this when he'd have to unstop time to load up internet pages over and over again? I guess he could spare the seconds it took to load up the pages. He's lucky he found some books off screen about it. Maybe what he really did was find this universe's Farnsworth and find out how to download what he knows about disarming missiles into his mind. He says that the missiles should all land harmlessly, and there's only one way to find out. I guess he's wrong. That makes sense since he's not a genius. Death proposes to Leela because he waits for no one. And when the missiles land anyways and blow up 10 billion people, except Leela because that'd be ironic, but somehow it wouldn't spare everybody, he has to take a while to get all 10 billion people processed into the afterlife. So predictably, he can't marry Leela because irony. I know she's a mutant, but that wouldn't make her immune to the missiles. Bender's upset that there's no one to steal from and his $1,000,000 are worthless. Except, wait, couldn't he go into a different dimension or planet? It's realistic that he failed to disarm the missiles. But if he succeeded, despite being stupid, that'd actually be ironic. He feels guilty and sees a robot adult bookstore. Then the comic disappoints me by getting lazy and ripping off a part of the scary door that I already saw and hated in the show. His eyes fall out so he can't read. At least it tries to have levity because his only response is, "What a day I'm having." And then Fry says the same thing. He asks for every video game and a back rub. He's told that they were hoping that sooner or later he'd find out that getting everything he ever wanted was actually hell. He's cool with that, realistically. Well, duh. Because he's only been in here for a minute. If he has video games, then that will provide a challenge to his life. So of course he wouldn't feel unsatisfied and bored. Realistically, it'd take longer than how long it seemed for someone to get bored of this, and they would know that by now. It's not just him being stupid. He says he's always wanted Leela to love him back, and Leela appears here and says she wants to make out. Thankfully, after being happy, he naturally wonders if this even is the real Leela because of this. Somehow I'm expected to believe that these people can't force someone to love him, even though they can create the illusion of love. So they're already able to control minds. He's just lying that he can't make Leela love him. I'm sure they could warp her here. He wants to kiss her anyways and says in a little while, but then she disappears on him. Couldn't he have at least one kiss? That was mean. He's told that he has to let himself out because everyone on Earth just died and they're really backed up. He asks for one more wish and is told to make it quick. Why is he being given a wish at all? Oh, right, because it's ironic. Also, he said everyone, but Leela's still alive. I liked that after he finally makes the smart wish and gets to go home with his friends, he's told to get the hell out of hell. But they explained the joke by having him say hell at the end of his sentence. When I read it as here at first, and it works just as well as a clever pun. Bender says he's once again got to deal with no consequences for his actions just to see a bunch of apes. And they're in ape world. They're trapped in the gorilla cage, and the zookeeper says these smart gorillas won't fool him with their disguises. Then we see Zoidberg having a book ends moment, narrating about what happens to his friends, and he says who knows where freedom starts and ends. And it's amusing that Hermes said it began when he sold him to the zoo for eating a sandwich. I love that that's why he's in the cage. The story ends with Bender stealing booze and me wondering how the zookeeper was so stupid. This story was fun, but it was also a little frustrating. Eventually I was able to make sense of it, but I had to be the one to do that. The crew gets sucked into the Twilight Zone that inspired the scary door because of Bender wanting to go to a robot planet, despite that episode in the show, and nearly every problem they have seems to result from them not keeping their mouths shut. When Fry specifically told them that this world runs on irony, so because he had the chance to tell them that, it's always frustrating because they all look like idiots. At least I didn't always know exactly what was going to happen next just because I knew it'd surprise the heroes. Fry eventually got his friends out of there by making a wish that conveniently got granted in the afterlife by people who hate him. All of the plot holes in that place could have been explained away as, it happened when it didn't make sense because that'd be ironic.